Hey everybody, my name is Matt McArthur. I am running for the District 13 United States Representative seat here in West Texas in the Panhandle. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know I'm doing some of these videos to answer specific questions that voters have asked us that a forum or something like that doesn't give us the time to go into, or to kind of answer common questions that people have had. One that I'm having lately is, there's 15 of us, for those of you who don't know, running in this race. One question I'm getting a lot lately is, what makes you different than the other candidates? And I've thought about it for a while, and to be honest, we have a pretty good slate of candidates of the 15. It's diverse gender-wise, it's diverse ethnically, it is diverse in many ways from when you look at what people's life experiences or their professions are. I've worked in the oil fields as a material control supervisor. I've also been a police officer. It's where most of my education and training comes in, actually. Now, we've also got teachers, a doctor, a lawyer, financial planners, and so on that ballot. There's a lot that people can choose from. Now, what I think sets me aside are a couple things. One, I'm actually from this district. Now, I don't want to pick on specific candidates. I personally, both as a candidate and as a voter, believe that it's important, even though it's not required, to live in the district where you're going to serve people in Congress. To be a part of it, to have your home here, your life here, your family here. I don't think being a congressional representative is something that we can just hire out, per se. Now, with that in mind, I live here in Dickens County. It's on the southern edge of District 13. And that's saying something because District 13 is over 40 counties and it's over 40,000 square miles. It's bigger than certain states. Now, I live here. I've lived here for a good bit of my life. I can trace my family roots in this county back to shortly after the Civil War. And because of that, that's something that sets me aside from some, though not all the candidates. Another thing that sets me aside is my job history. And I think this is something that voters here in District 13 should consider. My career has basically encompassed three areas. While in college and shortly after, I worked as a hunting guide, primarily on bird hunting operations, and had to train bird dogs. It gave me a look into land management for the purposes of wildlife, the effect that commercial hunting can have, both on the people working in it, but also in local areas, and an idea of how government can often cause problems with it. Now, if you drive through most of these small towns up through the Panhandle of West Texas, especially in the fall, anytime you go by a hotel or a restaurant, you're going to see signs that say "Welcome Hunters." These small towns need that economic stimulus from having people come in to do hunting leases or take packaged hunts when they get to go out. The hunting industry is very large in this district. And it's something that I don't think many of the other candidates are thinking about. And while it's not necessarily on a lot of voters' minds, it is something that should be seriously considered. And I'm the only one with any real experience in it. Other candidates hunt, I'm sure. I'm the only one who's done it professionally, who's had to take people out on a piece of property to shoot some quail, yet at the same time make sure that there's going to be quail tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. So I would also be one of the very few people in Congress that has any practical experience of wildlife conservation and wildlife conservation from a hunting point of view. I would be the only candidate who's worked in the energy sector on this field. Now, a lot of people talk about the energy sector. We talk about oil and gas or wind energy, where there's a lot of that up here in the Panhandle. I don't know that any of the other candidates on the stage have worked in it. Now, I've worked in it in a management capacity, dealing with a good number of employees and millions of dollars in materials on a day in and day out basis. I understand how efficient, how effective the energy industry is. In Texas, it's over 300,000 jobs. It's one of the big drivers of the Trump economy. He took a lot of the restrictions off the oil industry and turned them loose. And as a result, for those of you who are unaware, Texas is actually a net exporter of oil for the whole U.S., but specifically Texas, is a net exporter of oil for the first time in our history since Trump has taken office. Now, the reason that's important is if you look at where we get our oil, and we buy a lot of it, it's usually come from the Middle East, places like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Iran. We get it from Mexico too, some in South America, but primarily it's Middle Eastern oil we buy. And, well, if you've watched the news and looked at the Middle East, it's probably not the most stable place to have something as important as our energy in. I mean, it's better to just have it here. Why not drill our land? Let our people make some money, fill jobs for our citizens. Why keep sending it to the Middle East? And I don't think that voice, that knowledge base, is something that has been well represented in Congress, certainly. I've also been a police officer. Now, we have a lawyer on the stage and a couple other people who've dealt with law, but what we don't have is anybody who's actually enforced the law. Now, understand, the purpose of Congress, like any other legislative body in the country, is to write and pass laws. Even the federal budget's a law. It says money will be spent this way. I'm the only person on that stage who's ever actually enforced a law at the street level. And one of the things I learned is how important a good law can be. When trying to interdict something like DWIs or domestic violence, having well-written laws is vital because it allows you to be able to stop it from reoccurring. On the other hand, you get other laws that are written very poorly. Take the Affordable Care Act. I have a friend right now who's got an issue with breast cancer. And what's really stressing her about it, sadly, is not the cancer, it's the cost. Because while she has insurance, we've gone to a system where deductibles have to be paid first. And what that's put her into is she now has to come up with a massive amount of money she really doesn't have in order to pay for a life-saving surgery. The Affordable Care Act, on paper, got more people insurance, but it rose the cost of medical care, it raised the cost of insurance immensely. I knew people when I was working closer to Houston for Toyota that would actually quit their jobs because if they made a certain amount, it was cheaper for them to live off of half retirement or disability and use Medicare for insurance than it was to actually work and have their own insurance. I mean, actual money in their pocket at the end of the month. They had more money by staying at home. Something that doesn't help the economy, by the way. That's the example of a poorly written law. Now, I think most of the people who passed the Affordable Care Act really thought they were doing the right thing. But they wrote a law that was bad. And it never occurred to them that there would be pitfalls. They said, well, it's better to have a bad law that helps some people out than a good law that we can't pass. But the problem is they made medical care and medical insurance more expensive for everybody. They shut down jobs. They shut down small businesses. They had people just having to say, I'll pay a fine instead of getting insurance. See, I'm the only person on the stage who's ever at a practical level dealt with laws and had to look at them and say, this law is going to be a problem. It's going to cause us headaches. That's a voice we don't have in Congress. I don't know that there are any former police officers in Congress. If there are, I bet you I could count them on one hand. And that's something else I bring to the table. Now, in addition to that, I've worked in farming and ranching. My family's done it for generations. So for the people farming cotton, something I want to put in the Farm Bill, or wheat further up in the Panhandle, or for all the guys running cattle, I watched my grandparents and their siblings, my aunts and uncles, I watched them and their families struggle trying to scrape a living out of this red dirt. Farming cotton, raising wheat, sometimes milo, trying to make a living raising cattle, and knowing that sometimes they had bad years, not because, well, it was a bad year, not because it didn't rain, but because of bad economic policy. Think about the tariff relief, the restrictions they release on countries like Argentina when cotton prices get too high. All that does is ensure that cotton farmers have plenty of bad years, but very few good ones. See, I'm a guy that grew up in this world, that grew up around farming and ranching, who grew up in the rural communities. I'm a guy who's going to be a voice and a champion for the rural communities because this district has always been represented by somebody from one of the urban centers. It has not, in my lifetime, and to the best of my knowledge, going back over 100 years, been represented by somebody who actually lives in the small towns, which make up about 60% of the voter base of this district. Now, I could probably find a few other things that set me aside, and I don't want to pick on the other candidates because, guys, we've got a good slate. There's several of them that if I wasn't running, I'd probably vote for. But those are a couple things that set me aside. And I think if you go to my website, mattmcarthurforcongress.com, or if you check out the other videos here on Matt McArthur for Congress at YouTube, or just check out the Facebook page, Matt McArthur for Congress on Facebook, or Matt McArthur for District 13 on Facebook. I think that you're going to find that I'm a candidate who can represent the largest number of people in this district, And I'm a guy that, if you look at my background and my history, I'm a guy who wants to. I'm a person who genuinely wants to represent the best interests of this district, and a guy who will give the people in this district their first true voice in a very long time. Anyway, once again, I'm Matt McArthur. I'm running for Congress here in the Texas 13th District. I'd appreciate your consideration in the Republican primary. Thank you very much.